let's say it is 20% harder today. Like, let's say it is it still a journey worth pursuing? Like, does it really matter that it's a little bit harder if it gets you to the destination?
Well, so as you know, Charlie, I'm fairly numbers focused, right? And so what you need to ask yourself is like, zoom out a little bit, right? Most people want to achieve a fairly similar thing, particularly people, particularly.
I just had to laugh because it's like you said this on the podcast the other week. It's like everyone wants 100 grand passive income, and I just laugh because that's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, everyone wants the same. Look, everyone has the same thesis. It could be slightly different numbers and there could be slightly different timelines, right? But what everyone wants is they want to be able to live life on their own terms, have choice, do all of that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily about sitting on the couch and doing nothing and drifting off into the sunset or whatever, but it's the ability to have that choice, right? To be the ability to do what they want, when they want, with who they want. Could be quitting their full-time job and consulting while they travel around the world or whatever. It could be any of those kind of things, right? Now, most people, or certainly the people that are listening to this podcast, or certainly the people that are questioning, is property investing for me, or should I potentially choose a different path or whatever, intrinsically understand that in order to achieve that desired outcome, they must find a way to elevate their current position to allow them to achieve that future state. So they must do something like investing, right? So that they can get their money to work for them rather than them working for their money. Okay, so we've established that basic platform. From there, then the question is, well, what do I do? And if you think that property investing is out of reach or is unattainable, or that it's not for you, then the thesis would then go to, well, I guess I'll invest in shares or crypto or something like that. And I would argue that the people who are doing that probably still don't even know what they're doing in those categories as well. That's just that it's cheaper and it's easier to get in. And I don't know. And I actually asked Gen Z about this. I said, why crypto? And he's like, I said, do you understand what you're doing? He said, no, I got no idea what I'm doing. But I know that if I get lucky, I could make 1,000% return in a day. I'm like, yeah, well, you could probably do that if you get lucky in the lotto as well, right? So the question then comes to risk and return. And this is a really important part, because even if you said shares, let's stick with shares because it's a lot easier comparison for people. Let's say shares, let's just argue for a moment that shares go up by 10% a year every year. That's pretty good. It's actually a little higher than what they normally do. Let's say shares go up by 10% a year every year, right? Properties might not, if we look on aggregate, on average, don't necessarily achieve that same top line growth. Like the aggregate on average is actually a little less than shares. But with the benefit of leverage, the total return is much, much greater, right? So if you put $100,000 into shares, right, and it grows by 10%, you've made $10,000, right? If you put $100,000 into property, and let's say you're buying a $500,000 property on 80% LVR, and forget about the purchasing costs and stuff just for the point of the exercise, and that grows by, 10%, let's just call it even Stevens, grows by 10% as well, you've made $50,000, right? So on the one hand, you've made a 10% return on your invested capital. On the other hand, you've made a 50% return on your invested capital. So the question then becomes, is it worth it, right? And if it is going to help you to move you towards your goals faster, but also be less volatile and less risky and safer and all of that kind of stuff, then I would argue, yes, it makes a lot more sense. I don't actually love property. I'm not one of those like property philiacs who's just like, oh yeah, houses, yeah, love houses. It's a better tool to get you what you want out of life. Like the goal should be, how do we live more fulfilling, more enriched, more satisfying, more impactful existences on ourselves, on the world around us, and all of this kind of stuff. Like that should be, I think, the goal. And for most people, it broadly is the goal. So then if you need to ask yourself, like, what is the vehicle that is going to get me there? I am yet to see, particularly with the application of leverage, which is how almost everyone invests in property. With the application of leverage, I am yet to see a better asset class on a risk-adjusted return basis. Yes, you can buy cryptos or whatever and stuff like that, and maybe you can also buy small cap stocks on shares and stuff. You can buy small cap lithium miner or something like that, and maybe get a 700% return in a year. You can do all of that kind of stuff too, but that's purely speculative. And you've also then got to look at your risk-adjusted return. Okay, what is the actual risk rating on that versus what is the potential return? And do I understand that enough to be able to make an educated decision? So I would argue that even if it is 20, 30, 50% harder to get into property, that the vehicle makes way more sense over time.
Oh, it's so interesting when you lay that on top of it, Goose. It is. And I'll throw in some maths. I actually credit to Stuart Weems for going through this. He took the share market and the property market. I think he said property on average returned about, at the time when he did this podcast, 6% was the average. Might be a little bit higher now with obviously COVID gains. And he said the share market was 9% average in Australia. He did the maths on $1 million compounded.
Yep.
And he said, what type of return would you have to get in the share market if you're no leverage in the share market and you're investing in the index versus the broad property market? You would have to get a 32% return on shares on your money to match property. And when he said that, that hit me like a ton of bricks. That absolutely hit me. And I realize you can use leverage and all the rest of them, but it really does just express how powerful the leverage component is if you wanted to match it.